Since Dungeons & Dragons is a tabletop RPG, most video games based on the license are either RPGs as well, or at the very least closely related to the genre. So it's always interesting to check titles like Stormfront's Forgotten Realms, Demon's Stone, released in 2004 for PlayStation 2, Xbox and PC, which is as far from any kind of RPG systems as possible. It also creates an interesting discussion point. Is the world and story enough for a licensed product to feel as part of a particular franchise? After all, if you just rename some locations and characters, there'd be nothing in Demon's Stone that feels like it has any relation to Dungeons & Dragons. Not even the leveling system, which instead of playfully imitating D&D progression for its own purposes, just does its own arbitrary thing using some skill and item names from the rule set. Of course, while a curious question, it has no relation to whether or not the game is actually enjoyable, which is what this review is about after all. The answer here is really simple. Would you enjoy a somewhat mindless but exciting action romp that you can complete in an evening or two if you can't allocate 5 hours in one sitting, and that otherwise doesn't give any reason to return to the game after? If the answer to that is a yes, then Demon's Stone is certainly worth your time, as it doesn't take even a minute into the game to understand you've signed up for some epic shit. And when the choir starts singing, oh, the epic meter goes into overdrive. Honestly, this is literally everything that has to be said about the game for you to know if you're going to enjoy it or not. But since, for some reason, in my videos I can't help but go into the nitty-gritty analysis of design, narrative, presentation and whatnot, well, let's do that here too. Before we begin though, I have to point out that the footage you see is from the PlayStation 2 version, which the game was originally made for. I would recommend trying out that or the Xbox port. Technically, the PC one, which is currently available on GOG, still works, but requires capping FPS to 30, as the higher the frame rate goes, the more various logic, a lot of it in cutscenes, breaks. And honestly, upscaling the resolution doesn't do Demon's Stone any favors, as the game looks best when you don't clearly see all the tricks of combining sprites, low poly and high poly models to create the most epic possible presentation. With that out of the way, let's discuss the game proper. In Demon's Stone, you play as Ranek, a human fighter who's best at hitting things, Jai, a half-drow rogue who can become invisible in the shadows and sneakily kill enemies, and Ilius, a sorcerer with some support spells as well as the most powerful and unlimited range strikes. And outside of some specific segments, you do play as all three, being free to switch between any of the heroes at will. As a note, there is no cooperative mode in this game at all. Now, there are some more differences between the three related to some items and artifacts that we'll be getting throughout the campaign, the most notable one in my opinion giving a jump action to Jai, but other than that, all three characters have exactly the same controls, combos and abilities. It's just that their speed and strength would vary. This is not a bad setup for a hack and slash game, of course, however it does become somewhat problematic when the amount of combos is as small as it is here. Outside of your bread and butter 3 attacks in a row hitting as many opponents as possible, we have a combo that trips enemies down so you can do a killing move, and one that does a very powerful attack that might or might not kill them instantly. The latter, while having satisfying animations, does have a problem of enemy death not actually happening while they're being stabbed, but rather only after the whole animation ends, which can look very weird. And then there's the much more situational push combo, which is pretty awesome to use in a location with pits or mechanisms that can instantly kill opponents. That's it! These are the combos. Everything else you get through the game is just stronger variations of that. Okay, there are also things like counterattacks, strikes when you get up from the floor, but those are not really combos, just very situational moves. I suppose it wouldn't feel bad if every combo would have some sort of relevancy throughout the campaign, but they don't due to the way the progression system works. Every level, each of your characters gets experience points and gold. They all get the same amount, which is good since you don't have to worry about someone being starved out in comparison. Between levels, you can spend XP to get new or upgraded skills, and gold to get new items, most of which basically increase variables, like attack, defense, time spent in stealth. Some do add properties like setting enemies on fire. It is sort of nice though that if you want, you can get some gold back by returning to a weaker variation of an item, and the property upgrades have parallel trees with different effects, and it doesn't cost anything to switch between one another as long as you're switching to the same level. Don't ask me whether the team is buying this stuff though, most missions happen instantly one after another, so atmospherically it feels weird that the party members end the level with one set of armor and at the beginning of the next one have a different set. But that's an abstraction I can live with. The other layer of progression pertains to enemies. In the second half of the campaign, they start receiving new properties, like getting immunity from being tripped when they're at full health, being able to block your attacks more often, as well as go through your blocks with some of their attacks, which is also annoying because it's often not clear which strikes you can't defend against. Now, it should be noted that none of your target-specific combos can break an opponent's block, you will just slide next to them instead. And there is no consistent combo that allows you to break a block. All these three different aspects combined, available combos, character progression and enemy one, taken together always skew your playstyle towards one particular move at different points of the story. At first, when you don't have yet a lot of items which power up your attacks, your best bet is to constantly either trip enemies to then perform a killing move on them, or use the powerful strike combo hoping it will finish them off in one hit. But then, as you get stronger while enemies get more defensive capabilities, it's best to just button mash your way through with a 3-hit attack combo. When you play as Ilias, you don't even get that kind of progression. The whole campaign from start to finish, his only relevant move is a charged up, ranged spell. And I do mean charged up, you have to stay for a couple seconds without getting hit, since not fully charged spells are at best very inefficient in the first half of the campaign, and enemies outright get immunities from them in the second one. So really, throughout the entire experience, Demon Stone is basically a button masher. It's just what kinds of buttons you mash changes slightly depending on which character you play as. At least in Jai's case, with her stealth attacks, you first have to find a patch of shadows to become invisible for a limited time, and then position yourself behind the enemy, but that's still sort of like button mashing since you're repeating the same actions over and over again. From time to time, you vary that up by performing a 360-degree special attack when the hero meter fills up. Or if all three characters have it filled up, you can press another button to have them all perform this one attack at the same time. For the most part, that's the extent of team play, really. Well, there's also an action called Team Attack, which uses a part of the hero meter and slows down time to do something? I literally have no idea how it works. It's not explained well and therefore barely used it. While you're controlling one character, the others are left to the whims of the AI, which sometimes acts really sensibly. When Ilias is controlled by the computer, sometimes he tries to stay farther away from enemies to fire spells at them, his best move after all, as well as cast support shield spells on Ranik and Jai. Other times he just gets close to enemies and starts hitting them. And Ilias is shit at staff damage, so at these moments you have to switch to him to fix the AI's mistakes. Now, I actually understand from a certain point of view why there is no co-op in Demon Stone, as it would require a redesign of a number of levels, since not all segments are co-op friendly, not to mention that camera work would have to be adapted and whatnot, but in moments like that, one can't help but wish that there'd be some actual human controlling these characters. particularly when they just stand still and don't even try to help you with level-related goals. Even though the other times they do. It's weird, it's inconsistent. With the core gameplay being as simplistic as it is, the actual enjoyment of the game comes from levels and story. Well, scratch that last thought. The actual enjoyment of the game comes from levels. Don't get me wrong, the narrative of Demon's Stone is not bad. Considering the game consists of only 10 chapters, it is actually structured very well, having good pacing, providing proper motivation, setting up the antagonists, the gradually revealing past of every party member, and even a nice little twist. You even unlock some lore-related videos with character voiceovers fleshing them out just a bit more. It's nice. It's also nothing special. 3 misfits who consider themselves outcasts of their respective societies accidentally release an ancient evil, but they team up, find value in friendship with one another, realize they're not actually outcasts, which gives them the strength to push back and defeat the evil once and for all. With a sequel hook at the end of it all that sadly was never acted upon, and honestly, I really wouldn't mind playing a continuation of Demon's Stone. Not only because of how a sequel would get a chance to flesh out the simplistic gameplay and storytelling, but also because even despite those aspects being what they are, it's still a fun game. The levels here are mostly very linear. There are some nice explorative moments, for example there is a segment where a bunch of warlocks are putting an ice wall in front of a door. The most obvious and openly stated goal is to kill the warlocks so you could break the ice wall after, but also you can notice that in the corner there are some jumping segments for Jai which help her reach a switch that simply blocks off the warlocks entirely. That kind of stuff is nice. Now of course this kind of game doesn't need very open levels or anything, but it would have been great had this aspect of discovery been developed further. The levels try to balance out the rigidness of the environments with the sheer variety of provided situations. In one level you escape a wizard's tower that's under attack, turning off traps to move forward, having animated statues helping you to fend off enemies, eventually taking control of a guardian to just mow down bugbears across a bridge. In another, you have to make sure that an aspect of a summoned god doesn't get to eat sacrifices provided to him. There are even some stealth segments, and usually I hate stealth in games not specifically designed for it, but here they're sort of fun. First, the actual setup is very linear and in line with the simplistic design of the actual stealth system, so they go hand in hand and sort of transform the ordeal into a tiny little puzzle where you need to figure out the order of which enemies to kill first. And second, if you actually do get noticed, there is no fail state. You'll just have to kill everyone plus some reinforcements in open combat and go your merry way. It's nice. The best level of the game is probably Chapter 7, Stand at Mithril Hall. It is actually quite weird narratively speaking, sort of coming out of nowhere. The mission features Drizzt Do'Urden, who is a character well known to anyone familiar with the lore of the Forgotten Realms. He is so popular to the point that a lot of people hate him. Now, I'm not here to discuss whether Drizzt is worthy of his reputation or not, at least because I have never read any of the novels he's in. I'm at least aware of the character, but in the context of this game, for anyone who's not, it's never properly explained who he is, why he matters, and his role in the story could be replaced with absolutely anybody or anything else. Which is why he is never mentioned again after Chapter 7, even though he is deemed important enough to become one of the playable characters in this level with the most overpowered moveset to boot. But Drizzt is not the reason why the level is so good. It's just a very exciting defense of Mithril Hall gates from the ice trolls who can be defeated only with fire, so you have to regularly make sure your blades are coated and every troll who falls down gets finished with a killing move. Since by this point you'll probably be in constantly mashing the same button mode, such necessities add at least a bit of some actually needed depth to the experience. And the context in which you fight these trolls doesn't stink either. From protecting the outer gate gears to moving towards the inner gate, a little escort mission, fighting the courtyard, taking down a catapult, it's exciting and exhilarating, with the only real weak point being the boss battle at the end. And honestly, bosses are a weak point in every level that features them. Don't get me wrong, they all have a different moveset or strategy, but they all essentially have only one, so it's the same pattern, quirk, whatever, over and over again, which would not be too bad if their health bar wasn't so damn big. Some bosses like to regularly regenerate it too. That just unnecessarily prolongs these encounters without actually making them more difficult, but rather more annoying. Still, most levels, even those that do have these basic but too prolonged boss fights, are great and exciting in their own right. Except the last two missions. They're so frustrating in comparison to the other 8 that it feels like they were just pushed out of the door with not enough time to polish them up. First, you have to deal with a ridiculous amount of enemies sent at you wave after wave after wave. Button mash galore. And particularly annoying when you have to fend off this massive amount of mooks that respawn instantly even after using the team super attack, while you have to fire preferably fully charged up attacks at wings of a dragon. Second, the enemy composition in these last 2 levels consists of a lot of Death Sladi, and they're the most frustratingly annoying enemy in the game. Their attacks are very quick, they block a lot, some of their strikes are unblockable and there's pretty much no indication or telegraphing which one, and they hit like a truck even with the largest amount of health upgrades possible. It doesn't help that these 2 are the levels with the least generous amount of checkpoints. If you happen to fail in Demon's Stone, usually you don't have to go farther than a single segment, at most 2. These 2 levels though, in case of death, can sometimes send you several level sections back, and considering the amount of enemies, it's very annoying. And finally, this is where Demon's Stone's almost impeccable presentation begins to falter. Throughout most of the experience, Demon's Stone is a game that regularly shows you absolutely stunning environments, views, and vistas. Character models are really great, their faces and lip sync is very expressive, and this is magnified further by some fantastic acting with some voices that actually might feel familiar to many.
If left free, either of them will annihilate Faerun. You must entrap the pair again, together, in a new Demon Stone. I know of one that's suitable. In Chult, the Yan Ti use it for unspeakable rituals.
And of course, the music. Chapter 9 though is much more drab with its environment design, featuring plenty of locations that are literally copy-pasted, a fact that's very noticeable in a game as linear as this, while Chapter 10 doesn't have absolutely any music for its final boss. Obviously, it can be a valid creative choice to not include music on purpose, but to me it doesn't feel like Demon's Stone has been set up this way. It just feels empty instead, and the fact that gameplay-wise the final boss battle is also too long for its own good doesn't help. Still, these faults weren't big enough to ruin my overall enjoyment of the game, and with that, we have enough arguments for scoring Forgotten Realms Demon's Stone with my Stasocritic rating system. Stasocritic is divided into 5 categories of different weights. Every category has 11 scores, each with its own criteria. The first category is Design, which has the largest weight of 4, as how a game is played and structured is what usually defines our experience the most. And for me, this is a clear 5. As a whole, Demon's Stone is a pretty simplistic game. Combat doesn't have enough depth, and what it could have is made even more rudimentary thanks to the progression systems. And as enjoyable as the levels are, I can't say that they're enough to assign a 6, since despite providing a bunch of varied situations, they too are pretty simplistic in their own right. Which doesn't mean it's bad or not worth of enjoyment, it's just that it is what it is. The second category is Emotions, which has a weight of 3. You can hate a perfectly designed game and love an absolutely broken mess. When it comes to Demon Stone, in my case the most appropriate score to assign would be a 7. This was the first time I played the game and I completed it in one sitting over a Saturday evening. Yeah, there were some frustrations in the end, but overall I had a bunch of fun and I was really immersed into the epicness of the experience that I just wanted to keep going. But also, it's not a game I'll ever think about replaying a second time, which, given that the campaign is the only thing there is the only thing that would be possible to do. Then we have Cohesion, which is about how well the game connects everything together into a singular, wholesome experience. This category has a weight of 2. Since Demon Stone is a Dungeons & Dragons game, here I look at it from a perspective of a D&D adaptation. In that regard, there are some nicely done things in the context of the game, like how the rogue stealth was handled. But overall, it's just a very arbitrary, gamey experience, with gold being abstractly spent between levels, different spells being just a reskin of the same action, stuff like that, hence why I will assign here a 5. When it comes to context, I have nothing else to add other than what I already discussed in the video, so let's assign a 6 straight away. With some nice little arcs and character banter at hand, it's a properly structured story that allows you to enjoy the levels. That's all that it needs to be, I suppose, but there's really nothing more than you can get out of it. And finally, aesthetics. I know I've spent some time lamenting how in the final 2 levels of the game the presentation begins to falter. When it comes to assigning a score, the keyword here I feel is begins. I often mention how perfection is an unattainable illusion. A 10 in any category is not assigned for absolute perfection, but for a very consistent, exceptionally high quality. And while there are some very noticeable faults at the end of the game, in the grand scheme of things, those really are just a collection of some regrettable one-off occurrences, and there's not nearly enough of them to say that Demon Stone as a whole lacks polish aesthetically. With all the weights and their scores taken into account, the final Stasocritic rating of Forgotten Realms Demon Stone is 61. I know a score in the range of 60s might feel disappointing, but Stasocritic is not Metacritic with its very skewed aggregate of numbers which makes people think that 60 is bad. In my system, a score of 61 means that the game is nice, really. You just have to be aware of its specificities so you can decide for yourself whether you're gonna enjoy it or not. I know I did, and I do not regret the time spent.